Today is Tuesday, December 27th. What to know about the massive winter storm that's been impacting most of the U.S. with thousands of power outages, busted pipes, and flight cancellations. Also, what one soon-to-be congressman has to say about lying on his resume. And the latest clash between the White House and the governor in Texas that this time landed on the vice president's doorstep. Plus, a decades-high surge in attacks on the U.S. power grid. What Americans spent more money on this holiday season, and how Americans are celebrating Kwanzaa. Those stories and more news coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. It's being called the blizzard of the century. The U.S. is now reeling from winter weather that's still not over. Sadly, about 50 people have died in this massive storm so far. More than half of them were in western New York, in and around Buffalo. There, more than 49 inches of snow fell, and it felt like negative 22 degrees outside over the weekend. At one point, the conditions were so dangerous that even emergency vehicles were unable to respond to calls, and some people were trapped in their cars for days. Even more snow is falling in the area today, so people are being asked to stay home if at all possible. By the way, Western New York may have gotten the worst of it, but millions of other Americans also have stories to tell from this winter weather. It stretched from the Great Lakes near Canada to the Rio Grande on the Mexico border, bringing historically cold temperatures, ice, and snow. Hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses lost power, and some lost water as lines and pipes burst. But relief seems to be on the way. Meteorologists say a warm-up is expected for the second half of this week. The winter storm left thousands of American families stranded, unable to go back home after the holiday vacation. Nearly 6,000 flights were canceled yesterday alone, and more are already being canceled today. And while nearly every airline has had some issues, none have had it as bad as Southwest. 2/3 of Southwest Airlines flights were canceled yesterday, and more than 8,000 since last Thursday. The airline says it has plans to slash today's schedule as well, since so many crews are now out of place and so many people are trying to rebook their flights. Southwest says it was especially vulnerable to the storm since half of the airports where it flies were affected by it. The airline also says it needs to modernize its technology, and a lot of customers seem to agree. On social media, some people say they've waited hours on hold for assistance. Others say they've had trouble using the airline's website. And a flight attendants union says employees have had all kinds of issues with their scheduling systems. Now the Federal Department of Transportation says it'll be investigating to see if all these problems were truly unavoidable. We'll see. A politician from New York who was just elected to Congress last month now admits he lied about his qualifications. Representative-elect George Santos went back on quite a few things in an interview with the New York Post over the weekend. For starters, his work experience. Even though he originally said he worked for Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, Santos told the Post he really should have said he did business with the banks instead. Then there's his education. Santos told the Post he never graduated from college, even though his campaign website says he got a degree in economics and finance. When it comes to his personal background, he has said many times he is a non-observant Jew. Well, now Santos says he's clearly Catholic. And those are just a few examples since he admitted to other lies too. But Santos says none of this will stop him from serving his full term as congressman. He says he just embellished his resume and did not commit a crime. But it's not clear what kind of reception he'll get in Washington, especially considering he flipped a seat that was once held by a Democrat over to Republican. Top Democrats have called him a complete and utter fraud. And the Post cites sources who say top Republicans assumed the issues would be, quote, worked out by the voters, that they already knew Santos had inaccuracies on his resume, and that, quote, it was a running joke. Emotions are running high over hundreds of people who were dropped off on the road in front of Vice President Kamala Harris's home on Christmas Eve. The migrants had crossed over the southern border and were sent from Texas to D.C. Several buses dropped them off in front of Harris's home in 18-degree weather. Many of them were young children, and some were only wearing T-shirts. So far, Texas authorities have not commented about the specific group. But the Biden administration says Texas Governor Greg Abbott was behind these drop-offs and that the Texas government did not coordinate the trip with any federal or local authorities. Governor Abbott did send President Biden a letter last week to tell the president he would keep sending people his way, saying, quote, Texas has borne a lopsided burden caused by your open border policies. He's likely referring to Biden ending some of the immigration rules former President Trump had in place as spikes in border crossings continue. In total, Abbott's office says it's now sent more than 15,000 people to Democratic-led cities like Washington, D.C., New York City, Chicago, and Philadelphia since April, all to protest what he says is Democrats' failure to tackle the border crisis. Other Republican governors, like those in Arizona and Florida, have done the same. For now, volunteers and churches in Washington, D.C. have stepped up to help, offering blankets and places to stay temporarily. And a local restaurant chain donated meals over the weekend. Officials closer to the border, like in Texas, are also asking for emergency help. Another attack on power infrastructure left thousands in the dark on Christmas Day. The latest incident happened in the Tacoma, Washington area. Police say at least one person targeted and vandalized 4 different electric substations on Sunday. More than 14,000 homes and businesses were affected. Energy companies managed to eventually restore power to most, if not all, the homes and businesses. But who did this and why is still a mystery. And this is just the latest incident of many. In fact, Politico looked at federal records and found assaults on the equipment that delivers electricity are at the highest level since at least 2012. For example, last month in Oregon, at least 6 energy facilities were attacked. And a few weeks ago, someone used guns to shoot up several substations in North and South Carolina. No one has been arrested from any of the attacks, and investigators are still working to figure out if any of the incidents are connected. More news is still coming up, but first, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's that time of year that causes me to start reflecting on my life more than I usually do. And some years, if I'm feeling sort of stuck, I found that it can be helpful in these moments to talk it out in therapy. Whether it's related to a career change, new relationship, becoming a parent, or just wanting to do the small stuff a little bit differently, therapists are trained to help you figure it all out in a way that is true to you. Well, as the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/newsworthy. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/newsworthy. More of what's been dubbed the Twitter files were released over the weekend as new owner Elon Musk tries to show how the company was run before he took over. Both the 9th and 10th releases seem to try and show close contact between Twitter and government officials. In 2 separate series of tweets from independent journalists, the reporters talk about things like how Twitter executives met with personnel from the FBI and other government agencies during both the Trump and Biden presidencies. For example, one journalist reported, ahead of the 2020 election, government agencies overwhelmed Twitter with lists of accounts that it wanted taken down for misleading information. And another journalist talked about how some opinions about COVID-19 were suppressed when they did not align with the message from the White House or CDC, though Twitter did not always comply with the government's requests. The reporters are saying to expect more so-called Twitter files to come, so stay tuned. Well, Facebook's parent company Meta agreed to shell out $725 million. That's to settle a lawsuit for allegedly giving out millions of users' personal information during the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign without users' consent. You'll remember that's when the data firm Cambridge Analytica used Facebook information in an effort to help push Donald Trump to victory. CEO Mark Zuckerberg even had to testify to Congress about it. When it comes to the $725 million settlement, Meta says the company chose to do it for the best interests of its community and shareholders. Assuming a judge signs off on the deal, it's the most Facebook has ever had to pay for a class action lawsuit. Although it did already have to pay a record $5 billion in a settlement with the FTC over the same issue. Since the data incident, Facebook says it's updated its standards for user privacy and data sharing. It looks like Americans spent a lot more money this holiday season. A new MasterCard report shows U.S. retail sales between November 1st and December 24th rose more than 7.5% compared to that same time last year. And the increase is even more than expected. So what exactly were people buying more of? As it turns out, clothes. MasterCard says clothing sales were up nearly 4.5%, while jewelry and electronics sales dropped by about 5%. As you might expect, Black Friday was the number 1 shopping day this year, followed by every Saturday in December. Spending on meals in restaurants also went way up from last year. So why does all of this matter? Well, it could be seen as a sign of how strong the economy is as a whole, since consumer spending makes up about 70% of all economic activity in the U.S. Christmas and Hanukkah may be over, but Kwanzaa is now underway. It's an annual week-long non-religious holiday that celebrates African American culture. Celebrations began yesterday and will continue every day until New Year's Day. There are daily ceremonies with food, decorations, music, and other cultural objects. The main symbol of the holiday is a group of 7 candles, 1 black, 3 red, and 3 green. Each one represents a different principle. Translated, the principles are unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith. Well, that's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Trivia Tuesday, when we ask a different trivia question every week. But first, a quick break for our sponsor. Did you know that the popular horror movie Scream wasn't just some made-up story from the mind of a creative screenwriter, but it was actually inspired by real-life crimes? The Moms and Murder podcast talked about this creepy connection in their recent episode based on true events. Moms and Murder is a true crime podcast hosted by quick-witted friends Melissa and Mandy. Whether you're looking for something a little more true crime light or something more serious, Moms and Murder is sure to have something that catches your interest. No wonder they hold a spot in the top 100 true crime podcasts on Apple Podcasts. These moms balance their delivery of facts and levity, making you feel like you're sitting in the same room having a conversation with them. Be advised that Moms and Murder is undergoing a name change, so ring in the new year with the new title Moms and Mysteries, highlighting a real crime every Tuesday. Subscribe to Moms and Murder. Simply search their name on whatever app you're listening on right now. Just open your podcast app of choice, type Moms and Murder, then hit subscribe. That's Moms and Murder, soon to be Moms and Mysteries, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Okay, now back to Trivia Tuesday. Today's trivia question is, which painting was Vincent van Gogh's only official recorded sale in his lifetime? You can answer the question and play along with us on Instagram. Find and follow us at NewsworthyPod. Look for the trivia quiz in our Instagram stories today. As for last week's trivia question, which celebrity has hosted Saturday Night Live more times than anyone else? The answer is Alec Baldwin. The actor has 17 SNL hosting performances on his resume. His very first time was back in 1990, so 32 years ago. And the last time Baldwin was an official host was back in 2017. While he's hosted 17 times over the last 3 decades, he's been on the show even more. He's popped up in lots of episodes doing his impersonation of former President Donald Trump. His portrayal of Trump even earned him an Emmy Award. So who comes close to Baldwin's 17 hosting stints? Steve Martin has hosted the show the second most with 16 SNL hosting gigs under his belt. John Goodman hosted 13 times, and Tom Hanks hosted 10 times. Well, thank you so much for listening today and getting back into your routine after the holidays to make sure you're always in the know. We hope you had a great long holiday weekend. We will be back with another news roundup tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.